Ahoy folks, and welcome back to Broadside Gaming with me, Zug. So, carrying on with our Zealot week, and today we're going to be taking a look at an incredibly classic build, which is the Stealth Combat Knife Zealot. So let's jump in and see what we're using. So first up, of course, is the Combat Blade, with damage, finesse, first target, and penetration, lol, at 80%, and mobility is our dump at 60%. Perk-wise, we're going with plus 5% melee critical hit chance and plus 25% damage to unyielding enemies. So this is going to be your run-of-the-mill bosses and monstrosities, and of course, reapers and bulwarks. Crushers sadly don't count as unyielding. Blessings-wise, we're going with Mercy Killer for plus 60% weak spot damage against enemies with bleed stacks, and Uncanny Strikes, which gives us plus 24% rending on enemy weak spot hit for 3.5 seconds, stacking 5 times. This is going to give us a massive damage boost. And of course, so is Mercy Killer against targets that are bleeding, but we will get to that. As for our ranged weapon, again, we're going for a classic, which is the Quick Draw Stub Revolver. This is the Mark IIA, so the not the Fan the Hammer version. This is the good version. So for our modifiers, we're going with damage, reload speed, critical bonus, and penetration, lol. And mobility is our dump. For the perks, it's the same as the knife. We're going with unyielding and increased ranged critical strike chance by 5%. Blessings-wise, we're going with hand cannon, which gives us plus 60% rending on critical hits. And surgical gives us a plus 10% critical chance for every 0.3 seconds, while aiming, stacking 10 times, discharges all stacks upon firing. So in case you are new to the game, that means you aim down sights. As you can see down the bottom of the buff bar, surgical stacks up. We now have 100% crit chance. And then we can shoot at our leisure. So if you want, you can wait for the full 10. Or you can chance your arm and just fire when you need to. So with unlocked and loaded, the revolvers did get a bit of a stealth nerf, because we did used to be able to just one-shot crushers and things, but it's still pretty powerful. Just not quite as powerful as it used to be. But it is an incredibly accurate gun. There's no sway. There's no play. It's a very good weapon. Slightly outshined by a few others, but in what it does, which is basically our sniper, it does very, very well. I mean, if you need to as well, always remember, you can just run up behind something and mag dump into their spine. You don't have to wait for the surgical stacks. You know, you can just sneak up to something and shoot it in the side of the head. That does work too. Anyway, now for the Curios. The Curios, well, pretty much the same as we've been using. Health is back in vogue. It seems to be working a bit better than Toughness. I will link in the description the entire reasoning behind it, because honestly, I'm sick of saying it. So, first one, max health, 12% increased stamina regeneration and damage resistance to gunners. We are taking the stamina regeneration. It's not because we want stamina to regenerate. It's we want it to start regenerating faster. And this will shorten the delay for the stamina to start regenerating. The next two are twins. We've got max health, more max health, damage resistant snipers, and damage resistant gunners. This is just going to help you deal with those pesky gunners and also keep you alive against snipers. If you really want to, you can drop the damage resistance to snipers to pick up something else. Maybe corruption resistance. Whatever you fancy, really. If you're going to have it, corruption resistance is always a good shout. But sniper resist is pretty decent, especially when you're in a sniper alley and there are lots and lots and lots of them. Because sometimes you just can't dodge them all. So there we have our gear. So let's jump into the talents. We'll start in the middle first. Anointed in Blood, up to 25% base range damage, reduce the further you are from the target. So The closer you are, the more damage you do. Purge the Unclean. 20% increased damage against infested and unyielding enemies. So this is all of your boss types and monstrosities, also including bulwarks and reapers. Then over here on the right, Backstabber, plus 20% damage on melee backstab hits. Scourge, melee critical hits apply bleed, causing damage over time. Melee hits or bleeding. On bleeding enemies grant plus 10% critical chance for 3 seconds, stacking 3 times. Toughness boost into Enduring Faith. We're also taking Second Wind, replenish 15% toughness on a successful dodge. And then we're taking Blades of Faith. Throw a consecrated knife to deal high damage to a single enemy. Very effective against most enemies, less effective against carapace armor. They have quick throw, killing an elite or special enemy in melee replenishes 1 knife, and ammo boxes replenish knives. Now, these knives do actually inherit all of your crit as well. So all of your inherit crit and all your crit from your build, your knives also get, which basically allows you to use them as a short-range deletion button. As you can see, they're very, very effective. And as long as you have a small modicum of aim, headshots will generally take down everything. They won't, however, deal any sort of damage to carapace armored enemies. You're basically flicking frozen peas at him at this point. Yeah, the blades are really good. And also you don't have to switch out them, so you can keep your knife out. And if there's, say, I don't know, a trapper is coming towards you, you can deal with it while still being in melee. Okie dokie, let's go to the middle line. Toughness damage reduction into toughness boost, taking melee damage boost into movement speed, and then duelist, 50% weak spot and critical hit damage for 3 seconds on successful dodge. And then until death, fatal damage instead grants you invulnerability for 5 seconds. Can only occur every 2 minutes. Back over here on the right, Dance of Death, minus 75% spread and recoil for 3 seconds on successful dodge. We really don't care about this, but we are going down this road. Thy Wrath be swift. Enemy melee attacks cannot stun you on taking damage, gaining 15% movement speed for 2 seconds. Into Grievous Wounds, plus 50% stagger on melee weak spot hit. Into Loner, you always count as being in at least 2 coherency. Into Stamina Boost, and then we're picking up Shroudfield. Enter Stealth for 3 seconds. While in Stealth, gain plus 20% movement speed, plus 100% backstab damage, plus 100% finesse damage, and 100% critical chance. And then into Mastercrafted Shroudfield, stealth duration is increased to 5 seconds, and last but not least, Invigorating Revelation. Replenish 40% toughness over 5 seconds on leaving stealth, also gain plus 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. And then into a melee damage boost here, into toughness damage reduction, into suppression boost, and then we're taking punishment. Melee attacks that hit at least 3 enemies grant plus 5% impact strength for 5 seconds, stacks 5 times, at max stacks gain in uninterruptible. Then into a movement speed boost for 5% movement speed, into Invocation of Death, plus 200% ability regeneration for 4 seconds on melee critical hit. We have a lot of crit in this build. Then into Blazing Piety, plus 15% critical hit chance for 8 seconds when in Fury. Fury is triggered when 25 enemies have died within 25 meters. And then, last but not least, Fury Rising. Critical hits also count up towards triggering Fury. Now, the Shroudfield knife builds are a little more tricky than most of the other builds that the Zealot has access to, because it requires you to be able to read the battlefield and also know when to jump out and what targets to basically prioritize. And it does require you to have somewhat decent aim, because you are aiming for weak spots. Weak spots, and mostly only weak spots. For example, with Ogryns, there is a spot between their shoulders that counts as a headshot. Slightly more annoying on carapace armored enemies. Doesn't help that I'm very rusty and haven't played for about 2 weeks. But you don't have to only think you need to use heavy attacks. The light attacks are very good for stacking up uncanny strikes, laying down crits, and getting bleed out on everything. Because you do want everything to be bleeding, because when it bleeds, you do a lot more damage to it, and you have a lot more crit against it. Of course, you do more damage from behind, because, you know, the old saying, rogues do it best from behind. But it's a bit of a tricky build if you've never tried it before. It's a very fun build, and once you get the hang of using it, it's incredibly rewarding. You're basically just jumping in and out of stealth and just ganking things left and right. It's very, very satisfying. But if you've never used it before, go slow. As one or two missteps of this build, you can find yourself in a very tricky situation in the middle of a horde where you really don't want to be without your Shroud Field. So, give it a chance. Try not to get wound up by it. If you've never used it before, obviously. If you're an old hat to it, well, you know what you're doing. And I really do hope you guys enjoy the build. And if you do, please do like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. It really does help us out. And I shall see you all for the next one. So until then, take it easy, and I'll see you later.